Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Small Business Show. I'm your host, Swire. My guest today is Matthew Hunt from Automation Wolf. He's a serial entrepreneur, B2B sales and marketing expert, and coach to company CEOs, marketing directors, and entrepreneurs. His extensive experience over a decade of helping B2B companies succeed in sales and marketing has driven him to create several seven-figure businesses, and he's just getting started. His company, Automation Roof, is known for helping clients generate a full month of LinkedIn content in just 1 hour per month. Welcome to the show, Matthew.
Thanks for having me, Swire.
What a extensive resume that you have. But for people who might not know about you and Automation Roof, what should they know about your work?
Sure. Well, they should know that generally the real obstacle that I'm solving most of the time for people is time. Nobody seems to have enough of it.
I wanted to dig in deeper into that, especially right now we're streaming the show live on LinkedIn. So let's focus on LinkedIn a little bit. In your opinion, what would be a great way to generate quality leads on LinkedIn?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say first that most people don't need more leads. That's usually not the root cause of the problem. Usually what they need is they need to create more demand for their services. And so the way you create demand is by adding value first and building trust first. And so we want to focus on adding towards the community on LinkedIn and adding to the conversation. And by doing so, that's going to lead you to, more leads at the end of the day.
I was listening to one of the video snippets that you post on LinkedIn just now, and you made a really strong point. You said in a seminar, I think you mentioned a website designer who needs a website today. You might not have all the hands up at the same time, but over the course of the career, we definitely got to update or create a new website. So the question is, should we only focus on people who can buy from you today? What if I'm not ready to buy now, but maybe 6 months, 2 years down the line, I could be a good customer?
Yeah, well, the truth is most people are not ready to buy from you today. And so if you're only looking at people who are in market as kind of small-minded thinking, and just like the example you'd given that you'd read online that I wrote about, if you only focus on those that are in market, you're really missing out because you can't really control when they're ready to buy, when they're going to recognize that they have a problem and that they're willing to throw money at it. But what you can control is the rapport and goodwill and trust that you build with them. And so the example, like you'd mentioned, that I always like to use is, let's say you were a website designer who offers website design or graphic design or landing page design for other coaches and consultants. And let's just say you were parachuted into a room with 1,000 of your ideal clients. And you ask them, who here is interested or has the need to build a new website or a landing page or the need for graphic design in the next 30 days. Well, 1 to 3% of the people are going to raise their hand. It's a very small piece of the pie. But if you change the question to who here in the room between now and the end of their career is going to need a website or design services or graphic design services, well, then pretty much the whole room is going to raise their hand. So they can all buy from you. It's just a matter of when.
Mm-hmm.
So it's your attitude towards, marketing to that group of people. And really the attitude needs to be to build goodwill and reciprocity and to build community with them. Stop worrying about when they're going to buy from you and instead worry about the relationship that you have with them so that when the timing is right, you'll be the most logical choice. This is how you get ahead of your competitors. This is how you become in demand, right? Is by being preemptive to the need, by owning that relationship.
Can you share some of the useful strategy on LinkedIn? What are some of the best practices you suggest, people to do? You said don't look for leads and to build a relationship. And it seems like all the new connection requests that I have end up in a sales pitch. So what
Yeah.
would you suggest we do instead?
Yeah. And doing a pitch slap is not a good idea. I mean, you got to get out of the DMs right at the end of the day, especially if they don't know you, because if you're a stranger It means danger. We've all been taught that since we've been 4 years old. And so, a better use of your time would be doing something like commenting. That's great. So, commenting is welcomed and not threatening. And it's a good use of your time. It's an opportunity to do one to many selling because instead of it being a one to one direct message privately, you now can have a message that's public that lots of people can see and read. And so if you spend more energy on doing that 15 minutes a day versus like private DMing people, it usually works a lot better.
Okay. Yeah, I actually have done that, and not. I would suggest not just any comment, right? Yes, you're great, awesome. Not that kind of comment. You really have to relate to what people are posting about, and do have a point, because when you comment on LinkedIn, they see your little tagline of what you do, and if you end up making a good point, people do go up and look up what you do anyway. So I think, to your point, I think those are really important that we should think of.
Yeah, you want to take some time when you're creating your comment. Usually you want to follow the 3 C's, which is, first compliment the content, right? Come from a place of positivity.
Mhm.
To communicate something that's deeper on the conversation, right? 3, ask a question, like be curious or tag someone into the conversation. And the last one is use a little bit of comedy, right? It's okay that to have a sense of humor and to be a real normal 3D human being.
Yeah, that makes sense. And another good point you also mentioned is, you would prefer consistency over the perfect content. What do you mean by that, and how do we actually do it?
Well, like most things in life, it's about the reps that we put in. And so I always tell people that C plus and B plus content that is consistent always outperforms A plus content that's inconsistent.
Okay. So instead of spending days thinking about what we should post, we should just be consistent on brand and on the message. It's, what you're suggesting.
So I think consistency is the first thing. So just remember, people only buy from people you know, like, and trust. Well, they can't
Hmm.
trust you if they don't like you, and they can't like you if they don't know you. So knowing you is first just showing up. It's posting every single day or commenting every single day, right? And it doesn't have to take loads and loads of time. This can be just something you block out in your calendar for 15 minutes a day to add some sort of value. Any kind of tip that you can come up with is great. You're probably sitting on them of hundreds or thousands of tips that you can provide, and a lot of people have not heard your tip before, so sharing it publicly is a great way to build some value. So it's something as simple as that. Now, if you want to structure your content in a way that gets a little bit more attention, you're probably going to want to follow something called the ACEs method. And the ACEs method just stands for authority, connect, engage, and show. And so authority is anything that you could talk about for 30 minutes without any prep time, anything you want to be known for. Connect is anything that hits the heart, the gut, or the funny bone. Engage is you starting a conversation, you sort of stirring the pot, trying to get community going on the platform, ask something that's stimulating. And then show is the art of selling without selling. And this is showing sneak peeks behind the scenes or before and afters and case studies of your work. And if you create content that follows the ACEs method, you're going to find that it's going to connect with people at different times. And then all you need to do is mix it and recycle it through the different formats. So video, text, image, polls, carousels, because you don't know what type of content people love to consume. But if you mix it all up, you get more bang for your buck at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think in my own experience since the pandemic, because I'm a person, I belong to two chamber of commerce. I like the in-person networking, but with the pandemic, unfortunately, we don't have that available. So I end up creating a lot of conversation on LinkedIn. I actually knows a lot of my contact now. We have not met in person before, but we became good business friends that we hang out and help each other on LinkedIn. So I do see that my business friend partner on LinkedIn are growing tremendously, since the pandemic. Now we kind of get over the fact that we don't need to be in a same area. I actually have friends that I made, since the small business show. He's in Paris, so but we talk a lot. We connect on LinkedIn a lot. So I do see the relationship building part, that is very important on LinkedIn.
Totally. Yeah.
So I think the follow up question I have to ask you is, we have the strategy, right? We have the what we need to do, but you mentioned that you need to build a personal brand on LinkedIn, and I want to quote you once again that you said, "Seems like every other day there's another tools that come out that wants you to take your credit card, and then they promise you it's going to work, but then you'll respond." And let us know what your response is, Matthew. And want to ask you, in your way, how would you advise a business professional to build their own brand on LinkedIn?
Well, personal brand is just what people say about you when you're not in the room.
Okay.
It's your reputation.
And how could one start building that on LinkedIn?
Yeah, so the simplest way again is like think about it as like how do I add more value at a one to many level? And so, commenting and creating content is like a good first step to do that. And as long as you have the intent that it's there to teach or to educate, the group of people that you're connected with, then you're on the right path.
Okay. So you're saying it's not selling. Do I have to be on video, on camera, or what type of content would you say in the beginning? While you're saying don't overwhelm yourself to spend like hours and hours create a perfect content. So what are some of the tips that you would suggest? Someone who's new to this, right? They have no followers on LinkedIn to start building their personal brand.
Yeah, well, you do need to have some connections or some followers. So if you're just on LinkedIn and you're in Ireland on your own and not connected to anyone, then nobody's going to see it, right? It's going to be one of those things like if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, did it actually fall, kind of thing, right? Well, no one's going to hear it. So you gotta jump on and connect with people, but that's pretty easy to do. Once you get a few connections, if people are engaging with your content, then LinkedIn's going to share it to more people. So you have to remember that there's LinkedIn's agenda, and then there's the user's agenda, and then there's your agenda. So LinkedIn's agenda is to keep people on LinkedIn. User's agenda is to network and build community and to consume content. And then there's your agenda. Your agenda is usually trying to sell them something, right? And so what we want to do is lead with the agenda of the platform and then lead with the agenda of what the people want. And the byproduct will be you'll end up getting the business that you're looking for if you lead with that first.
So do you think it's a numbers game, or should I still be selective on whom I connect with on LinkedIn?
Yeah, you want to be picky with who you connect with. So what you're looking for is, have you spoken to them before? Do you have a relationship? Would you recognize each other if you saw each other's photo? Have you spoken before online or offline? Are you interested in the same, topics and interests? Because if you're not, then they're not going to pay attention to your content. Or if you don't have a connection, they're not going to pay attention to your content. And if they don't pay attention to the content, then LinkedIn's not going to share it. And they can tell like whether you're paying attention. It's not just based on likes and comments and impressions or other engagement metrics. What they're really looking for is something called dwell rate. Like, did someone stop and pay attention to this content? And if they can see whether people are or not, and if they see that they are, they'll share it with more people on the network. And that's how you get more reach.
Yeah, I do see that. When I have a new connection on LinkedIn, I see their posts, almost like they show me their previous posts too, like from weeks ago. And, if I start seeing them, I start to get more of those feeds in my, homepage. So I think you're right. But I think the challenge for all of us and going back to what you just talked about, don't we want something perfect to be on there? We all looks nice with our hair, if you have hair, right? And then dress nice and really speak, engage on the big stage, right? So we want to impress people versus to be consistent posting, but not like the viral type material? Like, how would you balance that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, everybody wants to be seen in a great light, and we all care about what we look like and how we sound. But you have to remember that vloggers and influencers have made low production video or content very popular for a long time. So I wouldn't overthink the production value of the content that you're creating, as opposed to really, is the content, hitting home and connecting with people or adding value? Is it hitting them in the heart, the gut, or the funny bone? Is it creating transformation for them at the end of the day?
So what you were suggesting is obviously based on your own agenda, your goal, and from that goal, extract maybe bite-sized content that you could easily do that, for a short period of time. And that is what you would suggest people to post on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Yeah, you just want to keep it snackable. You want to keep it micro. Like, you have to remember, when people show up on LinkedIn, they're in the mindset of two things: either to procrastinate between meetings, or they're in discovery mode. It's like today's modern day magazine. And so they're just looking to scroll through. What you're looking to be able to do is stop the thumb scrolling. And just remember, that is just your short form content. Now, it requires more than short form content to really create demand. There's really three pillars to demand generation through content. So there's short form,
Mhm.
long form, and controlled form. So short form is what shows up in the news feed as in snackable content. And this can be organic or paid. Long form is when you bump into something like this. This is like a workshop or a webinar or an interview, and Ask Me Anything, a fireside chat, a podcast, anything where someone can spend more like an hour or longer with you, where they start binge watching your content. And then controlled form is something that you put them into where it doesn't feel like it's marketing, like it's an invisible marketing funnel. And so this could be community or a newsletter, obviously permission based, where they opt into it. And this way you can continue to keep adding value. But if you do all three pillars over time, usually you win and will build demand.
Hmm. While you're talking, I'm thinking about my own example. So this will be a long form for me. So I'm not doing enough of the short form, which are, when you say short form, would it be like 1 to 3 minute side video, really short, even 30 seconds of just one quick tips of the day, right?
Totally. Yeah. And it can exist anywhere. It doesn't have to just be on LinkedIn. It could be on Instagram Reels. It could be a YouTube short. It could be on TikTok. And it could be in many different formats. It doesn't always need to be a video format. But that, as long as it's short and snackable, it's a bit of a teaser. It's a way to get some attention. Just remember, like, money flows to where attention goes.
Mhm. Yeah, if they start recognizing your company, like you said, they might not be ready to buy today, but when they are in the market, you are probably the first name that they think of. So, giving you another example, I talked to a PR expert on the show. She mentioned that you want to be the go-to expert in your industry. So the go-to expert is the most well, doesn't have to be the best sometime, right? But you have the most well known. So when we talk about cars, when we talk about motivational speaker, we already have someone and some names in mind, and they might not be the best, but then they're probably the most well known.
Yeah, well, birds of a feather flock together, right? And so, anytime you're an expert or you create community, others usually want to gravitate towards that. I mean, just like, look, if you're not just ever just into cars, you're into like hot rods. And then if you're into hot rods, you're into a very specific type of hot rod, like a Corvette or a Mustang. And you'll travel across the country to hang out with other people who are into that very specific model or car. Well, this applies to anything in life. This is why birds of a feather flock together. Now, one way to amplify this is for you to use sponsored content on these paid platforms. And so what's so great about like LinkedIn is you can build what's called like a Dream 1000 list. Have you ever heard of like what a Dream 1000 list is?
No, please tell me more.
Okay, so this is where you go, who would be my ideal clients? You can build a list or a company list. Like, generally speaking, who you want as clients is not invisible. Like, with
Mhm.
today's tools, it's really easy to find these individuals and build a list of it. Well, what platforms like LinkedIn allow you to do is they allow you to take that list and upload it to the paid platform, where you can get what's called a matched audience. And when you
Mm.
get the matched audience, you can then guarantee your snackable content will show up um, in in the news feed. And so if you apply enough pressure and people see you enough, they're more likely to take that journey from your snackable content to your long form content to your controlled form content. It becomes the lead domino to everything else. But you can just pay to play to get the eyeballs that you're after to begin building the demand.
That's very interesting. What would you advise? And I'm sure that different industry at different budget. Like for campaigns like that, for a small business owner who are intrigued by what it could do, and I agree. I could reach to the CEO of my dream client probably in 2 clicks. I have people who know them from chamber that
Yeah.
are can connect with them. Like what sort of budget or what sort of commitment should we expect?
Well, what's so great about these platforms is it's pay to play. And so you can put it out there for what your budget is. What I find in general is if your audience is relatively small, let's just say that you take an audience of 1,000 companies,
Hmm.
and let's say you have 3,000 stakeholders at each, or three stakeholders at each company who would be your ideal prospects. Well, that gives you an audience of 3,000. So that audience of 3,000, if you look at it like a platform like LinkedIn, you will find that the cost per impression per thousand is about $50,
Okay.
right? So if you want to reach the 3,000 people, it'll be $150. And it's just a matter of how many times do you want to reach them. So if you want to reach them 15 times in a month, you're going to spend $1,500.
Yeah, that's manageable. If you think about, all the CEO or the executive or whoever that you really want to connect with, and LinkedIn can help you break it down to the job title, where they're located, what their job functions are. So you can get really detailed. And like Matthew said, build your own list, and, you can let it grow. But I think $1,500 to reach your dream client is some money well spent.
Totally. It's very good money well spent. Like, how would you reach those individuals with like any other way so cost effectively?
Especially if they start following your content, if they even like your content, then it becomes organic. Now after a while, you might or might not have to pay for it. They actually became your follower. Then you can have really the control and take them where you want them to go.
Totally. And a lot of times you can see who's engaged with your content, in which case you can go and connect with them directly so you can get them organically, right? So you can see who likes or comments on it. You can even see in the ads platform if they're engaging with it. So one really good metric to measure is like watch time. Like, did they complete watching the content, right? Or what was the dwell rate or the frequency rate? These are all really good ways to tell if it's working as a leading indicator of success. Of course, the lagging indicator of success is them breadcrumbing their way through your marketing funnel and ultimately ending up in your marketing or sales pipeline.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'll definitely go look at that. I wanted to bring up another point. I saw that from the show note that you gave me. You actually encourage people to become an expert of nothing. What does that mean, and how do we do that?
Yeah, so sometimes we're overthinking on how to become an expert. And one of the easiest things for you to do is stop being the talent and instead become the talent, scout, right? So if you think about a lot of big brands have been doing this for a long time. Think about Oprah or Dr. Phil or Tim Ferriss or Joe Rogan. What are they experts of? Generally speaking, it's nothing. But what are they really good at doing is they're really good at finding experts and interviewing those experts. And then what ends up happening on like this example of what's happening here, Swire, right? You're not so much creating the content, you're co-creating it and guiding it and asking questions. But generally speaking, you invited a guest to create the content for you, but you end up being the host and you have an interesting expert that comes in. Well, each show you stay as the host, the fixed host, and new expert comes in and then new expert, but nobody remembers all the different experts. They just remember the host at the end of the day. This is why how you build a really big community or a really big brand at the end of the day. And if you look at Oprah, if Oprah says go buy this book, everybody goes buys this book, but it's not based on her expertise. What she's really good at doing is spotting the talent, finding the talent. So what you want to become is a talent scout, not necessarily the talent. You don't need to be the expert. So generally speaking, I'm like, stop trying to be the expert and really just go find the experts.
Thank you, Matthew. I'll take it as a compliment. You're comparing me to all those names. But I think you're right, because I myself, knows whatever that I know. However, when I interview experts like yourself and other people in different industry, I might not know anything in what they do, and I have zero authority in those areas. But by using their publicity, sometime, maybe their expertise, then I get draw more eyeballs, especially on LinkedIn now. People actually look for the show and then look for the type of expert. What type of expert is he bringing on to the show this time. So I think that's actually helped me in my own networking better, especially I think by having a podcast that stream live on LinkedIn, create a lot more conversation for me. And I think using your point to reach out to my dream client, now I'm not just Swire trying to sell you something. I actually think your CEO is very interesting. Would he or she be interested to be the guest on my show? I have actually made a lot more conversation and content this way than I would if I don't have the show streaming on LinkedIn.
Totally, exactly. It's actually like a law, so it's called the Law of Transference. And so people will transfer their expertise towards you if you're right beside them.
Okay, that's very interesting. But I think my top question for you, and I wanted to save until the last to ask you, how do I really use like an hour to create a whole month long content? Like, what would you suggest? I think I'm spending too much time on LinkedIn every day.
Yeah, so yeah, for sure. Time is really important. It's, for especially for busy people. It's like usually their most it's a non-renewable resource. And so how you go about doing things matter. Like if you look at like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, like they're the same time that we all have. They have the same 30 days each month. They got the same 4 weeks, the same 7 days, the same 24 hours in each day. How do they get so much done and we get so little done? Well, it comes down to just time management. And so one way that we help a lot of busy founders and CEOs create all their content is we just lead with video first. We interview them for an hour. And then through that hour interview, it ends up getting sliced and diced into lots of little videos, or it inspires the text, the images, and the polls. And so if they spend an hour with us, we can create, hundreds of pieces of content, and then we can send it to them for approval or feedback and then syndicate it. This gives them major leverage. So anytime you can find leverage in your life this way, where you can multiply yourself and expand yourself without actually taking up your time, is usually a good tactic, or something really good to put energy towards.
Okay, that's interesting. Like, I'm a big fan of Tim Ferriss, because like he would get on expert that I really been trying to listen to, and then he asked them good questions. I think, being a good host and being a good form interviewer, you gotta have open-ended question. If I ask you a question, Matthew, then you just answer me yes or no, then it's not a very engaging conversation. So I think be curious, it's one of the good point. And like you said, you have something, your own agenda. Obviously we are posting on LinkedIn with our own agenda, but can you make it shareable, and can you make it fun, right, like you
Yeah,
suggest? So people actually say, check this out, and they will send it to 10 people in their office. And you actually branding yourself to be the expert and the content creator that people reach out for.
totally. Yep. I think it's called the dark web or dark social, where things get shared all the time that way. Yeah.
So Matthew, I think this is a great conversation for listener who have individual question that want to reach out to you for advice. What would be the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, they can just go to automationwolf.com. It's spelled exactly the way it sounds, or you can find me on LinkedIn. It's the only social media platform that I'm active on right now.
I would suggest everyone to follow Matthew right now. He posts really good content every day, and I'm learning a lot of tips and tricks. Since I connect with him. Thank you so much for coming on to the show today, Matthew.
Thanks, Swire. Thanks for having me on.